Welcome to the vlog. Today's vlog is, as you can see by the lights, it's a little bit more serious. Had something in my mouth. Before I dive into this, I do want to put out a little bit of a disclaimer. These are just my personal thoughts. They have nothing to do with anybody else out there and should not affect the way that you feel about things. These are just personal thoughts, personal opinions. If you would, let me know what you think of this video. I'm very hesitant to even put it out there. I've debated for a long time on whether I should do videos that go into something so personal to me. But they're a big part of who I am is the other thing. It's like everything comes out of this, our belief system now, which is very different than it was before. And so I really want to do videos about that because it just connects to every part of our life now. And I think it's interesting. I think people have struggles themselves with their beliefs, and we're not at all trying to persuade people one way or the other. But I think one of the things we want is authenticity. And so I think I guess I'm like, well, I should be authentic myself. So, but I'm trying to make these as safe, like not safe, but just what do I feel like could possibly be beneficial to other people? And what is like just nonsense, pointless, no reason in bringing that up. So I'm trying to walk that line fine. I would love to know what your thoughts are. Is this stupid? Does this just make people angry? And it's like, yeah, just stick to videos about travel. Just do that. I don't know. Let me know. Let's jump into it. This should be fun. Yay! Let's talk about uncomfortable things. That'll be good. It'll be fun. It's probably a mistake. I should get some bourbon for this. Good idea. Because you know it makes deep, awkward, uncomfortable, possibly offensive conversation better? Alcohol. Okay. Well, let's start with my background in church and where I'm coming from, so you have a little bit of an idea of where I'm coming from. I was raised in church, grew up in church my whole life. Christian, Bible-believing sort of churches. Soon after my wife and I were married, I became a youth pastor at a small little hometown church that we went to that had like 50 people in it. I did that for about a year and a half. After that, we went to another youth pastoring position at another church, a church about 300. After that, we went to work for our state's denominational headquarters. I worked there with youth again and also media. All in all, we did youth ministry for around 5-ish years. Learned a lot. Nothing changed at that point. We were still full-blown, we were going to church till the day we die kind of people. After that, I switched focus to completely media and gained more success, I guess you could say. I went to work for a massive media company within the church world, started a video department within that place. Then I went to a church, it was a large church of about 10 to 15,000 people as the video guy. From there, I branched out and did some consulting for different churches all across the country. I got really close with 4 particular churches, one in Utah, one in Florida, 2 in Texas. After that, I worked at another church of about 3,000 or so. So you think with that kind of background, with church being my world, why now 4 years later are we like, we'll never go to church again? I'm back. It's hard to word this stuff without sounding super negative. I'm just gonna go for it. I'm just gonna tell you and you can comment away however you'd like. There's only gonna be 6 or 7 people who watch this anyway, so I'm gonna say this a lot. It'll get redundant. But I'm going to say in my opinion a lot, just to make sure you know, this is just me, just my thoughts, my issues, my struggles, okay? In my opinion, biggest reason for us for not going is we don't see the point. Church to us seems purposeless. It felt for us way too guilt-driven It just felt like if we didn't go to church, we were doing something wrong because, well, that's what you're supposed to do. Why do we go to this building on the weekends? It was like, well, because you're supposed to, because that's what we've always done, because that's what I was told I was supposed to do, because I feel guilty if I don't go, or I feel like if I don't go, then maybe things will go wrong. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. It just doesn't, I don't know. It's just what you're supposed to do. And that was never a strong enough reason for us. So we really started thinking about, like, why do we go? What do we get at? What is the point? I understand the reason for it is community. You want to go to church to connect with other people who have the same beliefs and build relationships with those people and share life with those people. And that usually happens in like small groups, community groups. Different churches call them different things. The way we do churches today in general, in the US anyways, churches aren't built around community. Even though that's the idea, the most focused on, the most funded part of a church is the weekend service. People say, I'm going to church. What they're really talking about is I'm going to this hour and a half long service on a Saturday or a Sunday. In that service, generally, again, in my opinion, you're mainly sitting in a chair looking at a stage, looking at other people do things. There's not a lot of community that really happens. You might be in a great conversation with somebody, really kind of building a community or something, but then it's like, hey, church is starting, get in the room. You know, that's not the point of a weekend service. It's to go and sit and watch things happen on a stage. And for us personally, we don't see the point of that. Like just coming over to our house and having very real conversation, that to us felt a lot more like what church should be than church ever did. Like, to me, if you're the kind of person who believes in the Bible, who's trying to follow the Bible, if you were to go back in time to Jesus himself and be like, hey, what church do you go to? Like, I think he'd be like, what? If you believe in the Bible and you're trying to be like Jesus, and you're trying to follow his example, the only time you really saw him in a church was to like tear it up or tell people like, this isn't right. To me, if you're looking at Jesus, his church happened throughout everyday life. It happened when he was going from place to place, just general interactions with people and hanging out with people around a campfire. Or, I mean, I keep going to campfire because campfires, you get s'mores, and that's a good thing. And the other thing about, like, in regards to this, is it just felt to us at the time, church wasn't a thing that you went to on the weekends. It isn't supposed to be a thing that you go to on the weekends. It's supposed to be who you are as a person throughout your life, your regular life, when you're not inside those walls. And for us, when you're saying things like, oh, you missed church, when people would say that because you weren't there for a weekend service, it was just like, oh, this doesn't feel right. This feels like you think that this thing that we do on weekends is church. And it was like, I don't think that's it. Anyways, I could keep going. I could get super preachy, and really things have changed for me to where I'll get into it. I'll have other videos on this, but I'm very far removed from any of this anymore. So then you go into even like small groups, which is where most people are like, well, that's what I really find helpful and beneficial in church is the small groups. And we've found the same thing. We've enjoyed those. It's just, to me, they can start feeling like, generalizing again, but they can start feeling a little bit like a miniature service on Sundays that you just do in someone's house. It's like, let's condense what happens on Sundays, but just do it with our chairs in a circle, and still lacks that bit of authenticity and grit that you get with just your friends off the cuff when you weren't planning on having this conversation, but it just happens one night over a campfire and you're just like, man, this to me feels like what church should be. So we really started thinking about, like, why do we go? What do we get at? What is the point? I'm going to say this a lot. It'll get redundant. In my opinion, churches are a byproduct of us, of our culture, of our time, our place, the technology we have. In my opinion, churches can become a byproduct of our sort of we-focused culture. Now, I'm going to also, as I go through this, I'm going to overly generalize. I know there's lots of exceptions and a lot of people who feel like, well, that's not my experience, and that's totally okay. I'll keep saying it. This is just my experience, just my opinion. And again, this is a generalization of all the different churches and experiences I've had. But in general, when a potential pastor goes to start a church, they look at what people want. It's got to meet a certain criteria. The music's got to be done a certain way. Some people don't want guitar and tight pants and lights, and they don't want a concert. Other people want the opposite. Somebody who's starting a church looks at all those things like, who am I trying to target? Who am I? And you build a church based on people's preferences. There's a church that can be whatever you want it to be. If you don't like this church, there's one down the road that's like that. Just pick and choose what you want. It felt like going to a restaurant. Like, I don't really like that burger place. It's like, it's fine. There's 500 others on the same street. Just go find one you like. And we thought, this seems weird that there's so many churches that meet what we want personally, our personal preferences. And there's just something about that we didn't really like. We didn't really know what that was at the time. We were just like, yeah, I don't like the feeling of that. And it was us, it was our problem. But it was the first kind of barrier, the first time we were like, I don't know about this. All right, this one, my wife just walked by, I heard her. She was in the boys' bathroom, and I heard her walk by, and she was walking out to the boys in the living room and said, "Boys, there is so much pee on your toilet. How do you get so much pee on your toilet?" It's a constant struggle. Boys pee all over the toilet. Okay, so the next thing is in general. Again, this is a generalization, personal opinion. It may not be your experience. I get that, but a lot of churches lack authenticity. And the lack of authenticity comes from the top down. It comes from the message you hear on like a weekend service. Messages in general, the sermons, the talks given in the churches that I went to, not all of them, but in general fell into two different categories. One was like 100% teaching. We're just going to go through a book in the Bible, and this is basically a Bible study. The other type of message on the opposite extreme was very entertaining, very like usually given by great communicators. There were stories, there were messages, there were thought-provoking words given. But those messages all wrapped up with a happy little perfectly tied bow. It sounded like YouTube videos that I do now that are just all about trying to get people to watch them. It's trying to get people to come to your service. So it was all about self-help, how to have a better life, how to live more impactful, how to find purpose, all these how-to-dos. And they all the messages ended with like a happy, and here's how you do it. And here's how you have a better life. There we go. We solved your problem. See, you're getting a lot out of the message. And I just struggled with because I knew a lot of these pastors and I knew that they had just as many struggles, questions that we did. In fact, most of them, again, generalization, but most of them, I would say this probably is true, struggle and have more questions than we do because this is their life and they're in it. But there's this pressure to not bring that out in a sermon, to not let people know that you struggle with this, that you don't know the answer, that you have no idea, that maybe you're struggling with your beliefs entirely. But that's where I was at, and I wanted a person to just be honest with me, not give a pre-planned and edited and tweaked. And churches at the larger level, messages usually go through a group of people that you kind of preach your message first, and people give feedback and insight and change this word and do that, and they're very almost performed to a certain degree. Anyways, I could keep going forever with it. I could keep going forever, man. There's just so much. Okay. This one is probably the most personal to me. And so I'm probably a little jaded, a little skewed, but this is my big thing. Let's get comfy here. So, okay, this is going to get a little preachy. And again, I am in a totally different place. So the things that I struggled with that I'm going to talk to you about were things that I struggled with about 5-6 years ago. I'll talk about where I'm at now, but I just want to put it out there. I'm very far removed from where I was 5 years ago, but I'm going to tell you about what my big struggle was then. Going to church, we were Christians at the time. And when I was in youth ministry, I would teach the kids that as a Christian, Christianity really boiled down to two things, two important things. And that was the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. If you don't know about those two, that's fine. It's a Christian thing. But those were kind of the core, this is what matters. This is what you need to focus on. They're basically, again, getting a little preachy here. Now see, if there was a church where the pastor, and they probably do, but anyways, in a nutshell, just so you can kind of see where I was coming from. The Great Commandment was love God, love people, basically. It was very simple. You could kind of boil a lot of everything Christians believed to that. Love God, love people. And then the Great Commandment was kind of the thing that you're supposed to do with that. So you're supposed to love God, love people. What do we do? Well, the do was to go out into all the world, preach the gospel, basically, which was, it doesn't matter, teach people to basically make what were called disciples. And disciples were people who followed Jesus, who wanted to be like Jesus. So it was like, go into all the world, teach people about Jesus and make disciples out of them. And that breaks down into like 5 general things that a Christian's supposed to actually do out of their love for God, love for people. So those 2 things, Great Commandment or Great Commission, that was my core. That's what I believed. That's what I lived for, were those 2 things. Trying to decide on how many details I want to give. Not that they're like too personal, but it just gets a little lengthy and I don't know that it really matters. I'll nutshell it. Basically, I started to feel like within the church world, again, vast generalization, personal preference, personal thoughts. Church, in a nutshell, invites you to serve and do. Most of those things in most churches, in some churches, in generalization, happens within the church. So the church provides a lot of serving opportunities. There are ways for you to get involved in the church, get plugged in, and actually serve, actually live this thing out. And there's everything from like working in the parking lot ministry to help people to park. It's like you're serving, you're doing, to like homeless outreaches and like the worship team, like actually being up on stage playing music is like, you're using your gifts, you're using your talents, you're doing it, you're acting it out. There's all these different ways of getting plugged in and acting and doing, living out your gifts that God's giving you to the world. But they're generally all focused within the church to better aid the church. And by the church, I mean like the place you go on the weekends, like that church, your local church. The things that you're supposed to do as a Christian, again, this is just what Christians believe. And again, I'm outside of that now. But when you look at the Great Commandment calls Christians to go out and make disciples, to show people who Jesus was and help them to follow Jesus and be more like Jesus. And that breaks down to a lot of different things, but that's the call of just every Christian to go out and do. And the thing that we found the church did was it made that easy to the point that you didn't have to do that as a Christian. Like going out and making a disciple, the church's answer for that was invite them to church. And not only even invite them to church, but we're going to have an outreach event. We're going to have this thing that doesn't really look or feel like church. It's very easy to invite your friends to. We're going to make it so easy to invite your friends to it. All you have to do is give them this flyer, send them this email, or forward this, like whatever. We're going to make it so easy for you. Just invite them to this thing. And it kind of led you to believe that like, oh, I'm doing it. I'm living out the Great Commandment. I'm doing it because I invited somebody to this thing. And then it's kind of like, well, your work is done because we'll take it from there. We have professionals in place who will teach them, who will bring them into this like relationship with Jesus and who will disciple them. Like everything's taken care of. Your job is done. And I never liked that it didn't really, again, generalization in our experience, the church didn't really put that responsibility on people. It didn't really invite people, show people that really your responsibility is throughout the week. It's not our job. It's not our job to get people to come to church. We don't care. Like that's not what the church's purpose is or mission is. It's not our job to get people saved or to get people into a closer relationship or to get people whatever. It's not our job. It's your job. You go out and do it. We're just meeting here together to help make everybody stronger, get them help them to gather the strength or whatever it is they need, whatever struggles they're having. We're going to work together to help each other because we're all in this together. We're all out there trying to live this thing out that we believe. These core convictions, these core beliefs we have, we want to live these out together throughout wherever we're at with the people we know in our own world. Church isn't really, again, generalization, but the church really isn't about that. The church is really about invite them to this thing, get them to come here, and we'll take it from there. Sit back. You just keep coming. You just keep coming and get more and more involved because we've got steps and stages for how you can get more involved. And anyways, we didn't like that. And I sound like Popeye. There's a lot of things that go mushier and deepier, mushier and deepier, and just more like, this is what really bothers us. But I'm not going to get into that stuff because it gets a little, I don't know, mud flingy or a little like, well. So that's the softest way, the safest way I can explain why we don't go to church. And again, I'm in a totally different place now. We're not. I will go into that. I'm not. My belief system, my core beliefs are now very different than they were when we were going to church. Very different indeed. So that's where we're at right now. That's why we don't go to church, because I'm like, well, we don't believe those same things that we did before. So yeah, but I'll get into that. That's another video with more bourbon. I would love to know what your thoughts are. Is this stupid? Does this just make people angry? And it's like, yeah, just stick to videos about travel. Just do that. I don't know. Let me know. I feel like the audience is small enough and the viewers that we get are so small that it's really just people who kind of have been around us, watching us for a while, that I feel like I kind of trust the people who are going to watch this, to be honest. And if the channel grows eventually, I'd like to know, is this worth doing, I guess? Because I have a lot of these. And I'll go as far as people want. This was just kind of a soft swings. It was just kind of let's see what people think. So let me know. All right, that's it.